First of all, thank you for coming. This is possibly, this is the first of what we hope might be a lecture series called Unexpected Perspective. And we may have some other lectures. We're in the process of seeing about lining up other lectures, and we'll see how we'd love feedback from any of you who would like to give us some feedback. But it is my opinion that I think tonight you're going to have a treat. Even if you're not familiar with the works of Jane Austen, and for those who don't know me, my name is Drew Jones. I'm one of the elders here at Mount Airy Presbyterian, and I have the privilege of introducing my wife, who will be the speaker tonight. I can really think of nobody more qualified to talk about the spiritual heritage, the spiritual foundation of Jane Austen. She's taught literature for about 40 years and has written extensively on the topic of the fingerprints of God, is a phrase that you'll hear as she talks. And she has a degree of literature from University of Maryland and a master's degree from Hood College, but those credentials really just scratch the surface. I've spent most of my married life buying bookcases, as she has brought books and books and books and books into the house, great books, and then she's also bought books about the great books as well, which she has read voraciously multiple times, and she is really a 24-hour-a-day student. And her passion really is for literature, but her passion is also for Jesus. And tonight is really an evening of love. Her love of Jane Austen, her love of Jesus, who was also loved by Jane Austen. So enjoy. Diane?
Thanks. Hope I live up to all that. I wrote out this whole lecture, and I spent a lot of time. Oh, hi, Nora, dear. I spent a lot of time crafting each sentence, and then last week I said, no one wants someone to just stand up and read something, so I made an outline and bullet points. But I have it here in case I get scared and lost. But I'm hoping to just talk to you guys tonight. Okay. In February 1794, Captain Jean-Francois Capot de Feuillide was executed on the guillotine. Do I have the men yet? That's what I was hoping for. Okay. His English wife, Eliza de Feuillide, and his son were in England, safe. They went to live for a time with their aunt and uncle in southern England and their 8 cousins, one of whom was Jane Austen. So she grew up with this cousin whose husband was a French aristocrat in the military and who was executed on the guillotine. I mean, that's an amazing thing to have in your family. And she heard stories, and she lived in France for a long time and other places, and Jane just loved her. Why did I start with that? Oh, because real men read Jane Austen. And a lot of people think that Jane Austen is chick lit, but the truth is that when she was first published, she was published anonymously, as many authors were back then, not just female authors, but it was just the thing to go anonymous. And many people thought that her books were written by men. She did not write romances, and she would probably spit at you if you accused her of writing romance novels. She felt like she could never do it. One of her nieces said to her one time, why don't you write a romance? And she said, I could never do that. Okay, so if she feels like her books aren't romances, we should also feel like her books aren't romances. What she liked to write about was 3 or 4 families living in a country village, working through their conflicts and having the resolutions. They're also about young women who are of marriageable age, but who also have some kind of character flaw that they have to work through before they can be mature enough for marriage. They also come across handsome young men who love to talk about themselves, who are charming, not only handsome, but charming, and turn out to be rakes and roués. A roué, there's a term we don't use every day, but it is a man who lives for pleasure, usually drinks a lot, gambles, but mostly commits the sin of fornication. And they appear in Jane's novels, and the main characters need to avoid them, and do, yay. Not all the books, I've heard this, they're just books about how to bag a rich husband. Not so. In three of the books, the main character marries a pastor and will not live in the lap of luxury. And one of the heroines, Emma, from Emma, doesn't need a rich husband. She's independently wealthy and will never need a rich husband. She marries for love. Not all the novels have the same plot. That's another thing I've heard help me with this word. Just something that Jane Austen novels have all the same plot. They have patterns in them, but they are certainly not all the same plot. The heroines are as different from each other as they could be. Catherine Morland from Northanger Abbey is 17 years old, untested, hasn't lived in the world at all, naive and just hopeful about things. Anne Elliot in Persuasion is an older woman who has known loss and rejection and is just sad. And so not only are the heroines different, but also the tones of the book are different. Emma and Northanger Abbey are hysterically funny and witty, whereas Persuasion is just more tempered and sad, although has a happy ending. Her novels are not morality tales. A very popular genre of fiction back in her time were fictions that were supposed to teach young ladies lessons, teach them how to live, teach them what to avoid, and strongly morality tales. She hated those. She wrote funny, good stories, and there is morality in them. The good characters are good, the bad characters are bad, but the purpose was not just to instruct women how to live. Jane loved the inner monologue. And so you're not going to get a lot of descriptions. What did the house look like? What did the characters look like? But you're going to know the characters inside. You're going to know what their thoughts are. And the plot lines are usually what used to be called man versus man plots, but now we can call them person versus person plots. Or in these cases, women versus women, not women versus women, women versus self plots. So we can use Emma as an example. She starts out, the first line has her being beautiful, rich, and clever, and what's not said is also spoiled. She has to come to terms with all the wonderful things, and her view of herself, which is, I am the smartest in the room at all times. She needs to come to terms and learn humility. Another thing that is true of her books that she said, and by the way, when I'm talking about how she felt or what she thought or what she did or anything like that, is because I've read her letters. So I'm not going to make anything up. I'm not inferring anything because I want to. I've read her letters when I was doing my master's capstone project. I did it on Austen, and I read over 5 biographies, but all of her letters. You know what? I'm getting thirsty already. Hold on. So what she said was, I never in my novels have 2 men or 3 men or any group of men in a room having a conversation, because I've never been in that room and I don't know what men talk about or what they're like when they're just by themselves. So, hooray, that is a good thing. But the movies will sometimes put those scenes in for whatever reason. We just recently watched Persuasion, and it starts with the sailors on the ship, and the wars are over, and they're coming home, and they're drinking and whatever. That scene is not in Persuasion. Jane was a satirist. So satire is witty writing that exposes faults and foibles with the intent of improving or reforming. She loved England. She loved her king. She loved being in the gentry class, but she saw that there were things that should be changed. For example, people who were valuing or giving honor and respect to people because of their rank or title or money, not because of their character. And so we see that in many of her books. I'm thinking of Lady Catherine de Bourgh right now. Someone who was mean and even not very smart, but she wanted to receive lots of honor and respect. So who was Jane Austen? She was born December 16th, 1775. So she just celebrated her 250th birthday, right before Christmas, which is why I'm here, by the way. But this lecture got put off for a little while. She died July 18th, 1817, so she was 41 years old, and so that's a very young woman. For a while, people thought she had Addison's disease, which is something John F. Kennedy had. They don't know really now what. Her skin started turning like orange, and she got very weak, and her appetite went away. But we don't really know exactly what it was she died of. Sad. I just wonder what books would we have if she had lived 20 or 30 more years. Alas. In her lifetime, England was in 10 major wars, including 2 with America. So a lot was happening in her lifetime. In addition to that French Revolution, I've heard people say, in addition to nothing ever happens in her books, they can also say, why, all these wars were going on and all these things were going on during her lifetime. Why didn't she write about those things? Well, that wasn't what she really knew. She'd not been on a battleship. She'd not been in a battle herself. She heard stories from her 2 brothers who became admirals in the Navy, and that's why Persuasion is so full of truth. But she just liked writing about what she knew, which was the 3 or 4 families in the country village, figuring out how to be community one with the other. Her parents were the Reverend George Austen. He was an Oxford-educated Anglican clergyman. He was the rector of Steventon Parish, and in the hierarchy of the Anglican Church, the rector is pretty high up there. And her mother was Cassandra Lee Austen, who is a woman also of the gentry class. And so they were a part of that gentry, and I'll, in a couple minutes, talk about what kinds of things the family liked to do with each other. She had 7 brothers and sisters, 1 sister actually. The first one, James, was also an Oxford-educated Anglican. He was an evangelical Anglican, and he had some ties with William Wilberforce. The evangelical Anglicans were totally all about not just converting souls, but mostly about ending slavery in England. And so James was right there, and he had many connections and ties with William Wilberforce. I don't know if they actually ever met, but it is quite possible. She had a brother named George, and George had epilepsy and was I'm pretty certain he was a deaf mute from all things and letters and things that you can read about George. He, when he was about 10 years old, went to live with another family who were good at dealing with people with special needs. But he was still a part of the family. He received some money when his father died, and he was considered a gentleman. Thank God for that. Jane learned sign language so she could talk with her brother. And that's something that we just don't hear about, but it just blesses my heart that he does. Edward Austen was her next brother. He was later called Edward Austen Knight because, if you're familiar with Emma, this situation will sound familiar to you. When he was 11 years old, a wealthy family that they knew asked if they could adopt Edward and make him their son and heir. And the Austens agreed to it. So he took their name and went to live with them, which turned out to be a very good thing because, and I'm sure it was a hard thing, like I can't imagine that situation, but apparently it happened. And so it happens in Emma with Frank Churchill. But when George Austen died, when the father died, he had a little bit of money. As a pastor, he didn't have a fortune, and they had to sell his books, which broke Jane's heart because he had an amazing library. But Edward had 3 or 4 manor houses and a ton of money, and he was able to provide for his mom and sisters. And they went and lived with him at various times. Sometimes they'd visit other brothers and their wives, but because of Edward Knight having been adopted as a boy, they were able to not be impoverished. Henry was the next brother, and he was actually Jane's closest brother. He was a banker, and he was also a clergyman, and became Jane's literary agent. He's the reason the books were published. He believed in them and made sure that the right publishers read them. So that was pretty wonderful. Another interesting thing about Henry Austen is that he ended up marrying Eliza de Fouillade, who was a widow, as we know. People married cousins back then, and I think it's creepy, but So Eliza stayed around for a long time, and she and Jane were very close, as I said. Cassandra was her only sister, and they were the best of friends. When Cassandra was old enough to go to boarding school and Jane wasn't, she went anyway because she couldn't have lived without her sister around, and that was the schooling that they got. They ended up having to come home because there was tuberculosis that was going through. In fact, one of their aunts died of it, and the school was shut down, and the girls came home, and they just ended up being taught by their dad at home. So, but yeah, Cassandra and Jane, the best of friends. Cassandra was engaged to be married to a pastor, and so lots of pastors in this group, if you haven't noticed. And he was going on a mission trip to the West Indies and died at sea. And she never married after that. So what ended up happening when the girls became older was that they helped a lot with their brothers' wives' families, like their nieces and nephews, and they were very close. But also, sadly, 4 of Jane's sister-in-laws died in childbirth. So another thing that was very common back then, 4 sister-in-laws, and they're not that, George never married. So Edward's wife died, her name was Elizabeth, after having borne 10 children. So she left a lot, she left a big legacy, but those children had no mother, but they had 2 doting aunts. Frank became an admiral in the Navy. These Navy guys lived a long time. Do you have their dates? Yeah. I mean, a lot of people say, but back then, people only lived till they were 15. But you know what? Jane's brothers did pretty well. And And Charles was the youngest, and he also became an admiral. And one of the things that you can note about him is that when he was away on one of his sea voyages, he brought his sisters home topaz cross necklaces, and I have the cheap knockoff version of it. I just wanted to do that to honor them. All right, hold on, I'm getting thirsty again. Okay, being in the gentry class, the Austens enjoyed parties, balls, card parties, concerts, all kinds of things. Jane went to London a lot with her brother Henry, and he took her to see the town, and she just loved that. The Austens also loved to put on family theatricals at home. So there were plays, and they would get the play, and they'd take a part, and they'd put on the play at home. Loved that. Now that situation also comes out in Mansfield Park, but it's not put in a good light because the father doesn't like it. But apparently Reverend Austen was totally cool with theater. Jane and Cassandra were more educated than many girls in their circle because they were just a literary family. The Austens, in addition to him being the rector of the parish, he took in young men, teenage boys to tutor, so to prepare them for Oxford and for the ministry. And so in addition to all those children, there were usually 4 or 5 boarders that poor Mrs. Austen had to cook for and clean and all that stuff. One thing I didn't put in my paper, but it just occurred to me that it might be interesting, and some of you may know this, but so Jane, there's a wedding at the end of every book, of course, but and sometimes 2, and Jane never married, but she did have a marriage proposal that she accepted, and the man's name was Harris Bigwithers. Now, there's a reason not to get married, just for that. But he was in their social circle. She was very good friends with his sister, and yet she said yes. She went to bed. She was like, I cannot do this. I don't love him. It would help my family so much if I were to marry, because I'd be one less person they had to worry about. But in the morning, she said, I can't. And the family kind of broke off their ties. They were like good family friends, and but that was the end of that. So yeah, I just threw that in. So yeah, the Reverend George Austen father, 2 of the sons became clergymen as well. The family was very devout, and they had family devotions twice a day. They had morning devotions, they had evening devotions. And at some point, we don't exactly know how old she was, but the father asked Jane if she would write some prayers for their family devotions. And we have 3 of those prayers. And there they are, 3. You can get this on Amazon. They're also online for free. Or you could be the lucky person who takes one home tonight. So look under your chairs and see if you have this. Elise, make sure you look hard. Drew, what's going on, Drew? Oh, yes, there we go. Okay. Okay, in addition to all the fun social things that Cassandra and Jane did, they also took care of the poor in their village. As the member of a gentry class and also daughters of clergymen, they were visiting the sick, they were bringing food, they were sewing. There was a lady who I'm pretty sure Miss Bates in Emma was modeled after. Jane sewed a shawl for her, so we have reference to that in one of her letters. So they were, charity was a great value for them. It's been written of Jane by different scholars that her faith was as natural to her as breathing. Her religion was an integral, unobtrusive part of her daily life. Her faith was not loud, nor did she make public demonstrations. It was a quiet, steadfast foundation. Now, some people feel that Jane did not like clergymen, even though she was related to many of them, because of Mr. Collins in Pride and Prejudice, and because of Mr. Elton in Emma. But if you stack them up, the good guys outweigh the bad guys. Henry Tilney in, where am I now? Northanger Abbey, thank you. Edmund Bertram in Mansfield Park and Edward Ferrars are all good men. So 2 against 3. What we can infer is ministers were human beings. They came in all sizes and colors. And so some were good and some were bad. And, you know, read the newspaper, right? Some are good, some are bad. So she just thought of them as human beings, not we're going to make the ministers all good as gold and they're just going to be that, or the ministers are all horrible because they're all hypocrites. It just wasn't that way. There's some that are good, some that are bad. God bless you. So yeah, daily devotions. In Mansfield Park, the character Mary Crawford mocks family prayers, and you can just pick up Jane's feelings about that. Mary Crawford is not a great character. She's she wants to prevent Edmund from becoming a pastor. She is all about society in London, and she mocks the tradition of family prayer. But that was not Jane. And I'll end this section just by saying she's never preachy, but her writing is saturated with Christianity. And we're going to talk about each of the books. I've done a lot of book clubs with Jane Austen books. And one topic that always comes up is, who is your favorite Jane Austen hero? Oh, ladies love to talk about it. Who's your favorite character? I'll tell you who wins. Well, can you guess? The men. Who is the male hero? Who is admired by women everywhere in book clubs? Darcy. Yes, Ava knows mine. I personally feel like Mr. Darcy didn't become that until he took off his shirt in 1995. Okay. He's a good guy. The person who wins more often than not is Mr. Knightley. Yeah. My guy is Henry Tilney because I just love him. I love the fact that he's a minister, and yet he dances. He doesn't condemn it. He reads books. He even reads Gothic novels. He's not just, he's not stuck up and narrow-minded and all those things. And he does the right thing. We'll get to him later. Now we're going to transition to the novels. Save your questions, by the way, because we'll have Q&A when I'm finished. Northanger Abbey is my first one. I'm not going to do like a lot of, this is the plot of it. I'm going to assume that you're familiar, and if you're not, I'm sorry, but it'll maybe make you want to pick up the book and read. But so we have 17-year-old Catherine. She's invited to Bath by a rich, childless couple. She attends balls and concerts and theater, and she's just loving it because it is, she's the daughter of a pastor too. And she has a lot of younger brothers and sisters, and she's just been confined to a small rural village, and all of a sudden she's in Bath, and it's the season, and she gets to do all this fun stuff, and she meets exciting people. And she meets a roue, of course she does. But she also meets Henry Tilney. And, but she meets a lady named Isabella, and they become fast friends. And Isabella says, "Have you ever read The Mysteries of Udolpho?" And she's like, "No, but I love Gothic novels." Yeah, she is a reader, but she limits herself to Gothic novels. And the narrator says she avoids all books of information that contain nothing like useful knowledge. So, oh, and Isabella has a wicked brother. He's the roue, just spoiler. So Catherine becomes obsessed with this book, Udolpho, and here's your first quote. "Yes, I have been reading it ever since I woke, and I am got to the Black Veil. What can it be? But do not tell me. I would not be told upon any account. I know it must be a skeleton. I am sure it is Laurentina's skeleton. Oh, I am delighted with the book. I should like to spend my whole life in reading it. I assure you, if it had not been to meet you, I would not have come away from it for all the world." So, I have been reading it ever since I woke. She doesn't have morning devotions. She reads her Gothic novel in bed. Jane Austen read Gothic novels. She even read Udolpho, but she read a variety of books. She was well-read, broadly read. She's not saying here that Gothic novels are bad. She herself read them, as I just said. I think what she's showing us here is that we need to have a variety in our reading diets. Well, in the story, Henry Tilney, the pastor, and his sister Eleanor invite her to their household, which is some day's horse ride away. And she gets there, and this is a Gothic castle. This is Gothic architecture, creepy vibe. It's thundering and lightning when she gets there. It's like everything you could ask for if you love Gothic novels. The other thing is there's a mystery concerning Henry's mother, who has died, and the father is creepy. And she just sort of makes this story in her head that the father killed the mother. So we are told that Henry's mother's room is off limits in this big old house. And she wants to figure out the mystery and be the one to solve the murder. So she goes there when no one's expecting it. But Henry comes upon her and says, "What are you doing here?" And she tries to explain it, and he realizes, "You think my father killed my mother." And here's our next quote. "If I understand you rightly, you had formed a surmise of such horror as I have hardly words to... Dear Miss Morland, consider the dreadful nature of the suspicions you have entertained. What have you been judging from? Remember the country and age in which we live. Remember that we are English, that we are Christians. Consult your own understanding, your own sense of the probable, your own observation of what is passing around you. Does our education prepare us for such atrocities? Do our laws connive at them? Could they be perpetrated without being known in a country like this, where social and literary intercourse is on such a footing? Dearest Miss Morland, what ideas have you been admitting?" It's something that everybody should check. What are we reading too much of? And now we have like internet and social media and all kinds of stuff. What ideas are we admitting? Anyway, that's all I'll tell you about that one. We'll go on to next to Sense and Sensibility. Oh, by the way, I prepared a semester's worth of material and only have 45 minutes. So I have articles that I've written in the past about some of these topics, and they're in the back, and please take one. And if we run out of them, let me know and we can run more off. But one of the ones that I wrote a longer article on that I'm cutting way down here is on Sense and Sensibility with Marianne's fall. So, Marianne, so Sense and Sensibility, there's two sisters. One is very logical and measured, and she represents classicism. And the other sister is very emotional and passionate, and she represents romanticism. So in England, movements of art and philosophy and music and literature were kind of moving from classicism into romanticism. The Romantic poets were just getting started, unless you count William Blake, but never mind him. And so Marianne represents the romantic, and she is passionate. She doesn't govern her feelings. She is just all out there. And when she moves to Devonshire, she is taking a walk with her younger sister Margaret, and she falls. And this fall is metaphoric as well as literal. She is scooped up in the arms of a handsome young stranger who turns out to be a roue, but she doesn't know that. He carries her home, and she just really changes from that point on. She takes a fall, and she becomes rude to her family, rude to her neighbors. She is just thinking about herself and how much fun she's having, and this handsome man, and everything is him. And then all of a sudden, he's not there. They go to London, Eleanor and Marianne and some of her other friends go to London, and while she's there, she finds out that he is there. She sends him letters, which is a no-no when you're an unengaged woman or unmarried. The other thing that was a big no-no is before London, he takes her on a tour of his house and no one's home. You just don't go in a house with a single man when you're, it doesn't look good. Anyway, she finds out while she's in London that he has fathered a child out of wedlock and has become engaged to another woman because she's rich. And she is devastated. And she takes another fall. And she falls, and she's carried by a very noble man named Colonel Brandon. And so 2 falls, 2 carries, and she falls into a coma. And when she wakes up refreshed, which speaks of renewal. I had this whole thing written out with quotes from her from one particular chapter, but I cut it out because I could be talking all night. But anyway, she speaks of how ashamed she had been of her behavior. She shows signs of repentance. She is a very different Marianne, and one phrase that she uses is the need for atonement to my God. You're not going to see that in any movie version, but there it is in the text. And she's resolved to change, and she does, and she has a happy ending too. Okay, let's move on to Pride and Prejudice. Probably in our generation, the best known, the best loved. We not only love the book, but boy, do we love that 6-part version that came out in 1995. And some people even love the other version. I can't even remember the name of the actress, but she's famous. Keira Knightley. Yeah, so I'm not going to judge anybody. Okay. So with Darcy and Elizabeth, as everyone knows, it's hate at first sight. But she receives a marriage proposal from him, which may be the worst marriage proposal in the world, unless you count Mr. Collins's marriage proposal. She gets bad ones. She gets bad ones in this book. So she tells him off and cuts him down, and she just does not waste any words. And then she gets a letter from Mr. Darcy. explaining his behavior. And here's the cool thing about it. You know when you're a little kid in Sunday school and you're told to open up, if you want to find Psalms, just stick your finger in the right middle of the Bible and there's the Psalms in the middle. You do that with Pride and Prejudice, boink, open it up, and you have Darcy's letter, which ends with, God bless you. You're not going to find it in any movie. The plot turns there. They go for a long time without seeing each other, but she understands him, and he's trying to improve his character and overcome his pride and his prejudice. They both suffer from both. So he saves her from Mr. Wickham. What's the key to this character? Wickham sounds like wicked. He turns out to be a roue. But yeah, he saves her, and they like each other now, and it all looks wonderful. And so someone said to me once, well, why didn't she just end the book at that point? So here's what I think. He needs to work out his repentance. It's one thing to be sorry for the way you've been, but it's another thing to prove that it's for real. And so he has to save one of Elizabeth's sisters, who has done a thing that just wasn't done in society back then, run away with an unmarried man and live together unmarried. He saves that sister's reputation. He has to overcome his rich aunt, who has lots of money and property to give away when she dies, but she's horribly rude, and he's willing to part ways with that relative. And he has to put up with Elizabeth's mother, who is also rude, and other things that I won't say. At the end of the book, when Elizabeth and Darcy are able to become engaged again and get married, they talk about his letter, and they talk about the adieu. And the adieu is the God bless you. That is the way the letter ended. And she says to him, the adieu was charity itself. God bless you is the highest form of blessing that anyone can give, and the reader of Pride and Prejudice is left to ponder its significance in that novel. So moving on, we have Mansfield Park. Two of the themes in that book are slavery and false charity. In the story, there are three sisters. One is very rich, really married well. One is a pastor's wife, although she's widowed now. But, being a pastor's wife, we can assume she's perfect. Oh, maybe not. And then the other sister married a drunk and someone in a lower class. And, I wasn't talking about anybody in particular. And she had a ton of children. So she has a ton of children. They're dirt poor. The husband's a drunk. And so the pastor wife sister says, why don't we just adopt one of these children out and give her a better life? And by the way, she can go live with you guys, to the rich couple. So they take Fanny. Her name is Fanny. And Mrs. Norris, who is the pastor wife, she takes all the credit for being charitable and good and all that, and yet she does none of the work. It's the other family that is really doing the work. One thing she insists on, though, is that Fanny has an attic room and with no fire ever to be allowed in the fireplace, and it just sounds like Cinderella. She's made to do the housework and help out with things. And the interesting thing that I just learned this week was that the Grimm's Brothers version of Cinderella was published in England just a year before Jane wrote this book. Interesting thought. We don't know what she was thinking, but yeah, interesting thought. So Fanny's treated like a house slave, and part of this is the uncle she lives with owns a plantation in the West Indies and has slaves. And so we've got slavery in the house, we've got slavery over there. It is a very immoral household in many ways, but the slavery, and Jane was totally on the Wilberforce, we need to end slavery end of the, we've got her letters. She was against it, and she puts that whole theme in this book. Yeah, the slavery is always in the background of this book. And so where are God's fingerprints in this story? Fanny is patient, but she exhibits moral courage. She stands up to her uncle who has asked her to do something that is totally against her principles, and she has the strength to do it. She ends up with one of the pastors the good pastors. She rejects a roue. She marries her cousin. Yeah. Okay, yeah, another aspect of this that I think is really important is that Jane Austen had a real fear about what was becoming, what her country was turning into. So I told you about the classicism versus romanticism, but she could see that the England that she grew up with loved their king, George III. We didn't always love him over here, but she loved him. He was married to one woman, had 13 children. The English people, for the most part, loved him, and families were going to church together, families were reading devotional material, and she could see that from London and other cities, this other thing was seeping in, this very modern thing that was, the morality was changing. There is premarital sex in this book. I mean, you have to read between the lines, but it's there. So the morality of people were changing, and Jane was, and it was represented by the Prince Regent, who, when George III was ill, he became the ruler of England for, I think, 11 years, and when his dad died, he became George IV. But he was opium and mistresses, and Jane actually hated him. You can read in her letters, it's actually kind of funny the way she puts it, but she did not like that king one bit. But you can see in the background of Mansfield Park, the Crawfords, Mary Crawford, who was against the family prayers, and her brother sort of represent that London thing, and Fanny and her cousin Edmund represent the more traditional conservative part. So this is the irony. She did not like this Prince Regent one little bit, but her brother Henry kind of knew him, not 6 degrees of separation, but 2. He was friends with the prince's librarian and also the prince's physician, and found out through the grapevine that the prince wanted Jane to dedicate her next book to him. Because even though she published anonymously, it was an open secret. And so anyway, he knew. So this is what she wrote in Emma, her next book, to His Royal Highness, the Prince Regent. This work is, by His Royal Highness's permission, most respectfully dedicated by His Royal Highness's dutiful and obedient humble servant, the author. So she did it. She dedicated that to him. Hold on a second. When I was looking for a topic for my final project at Hood, I had spent my entire graduate school in Shakespeare classes of different kinds, and even having one-on-one tutorials with a Shakespeare professor, and I was really trying to find a topic in Shakespeare that I could write about. And I was meeting with my mentor, and I said, there's one thing that I just can't get out of my mind, and that is when I'm reading Emma, I feel like Jane Austen must have been studying the book of James while she was writing it. And he was like, that's original, go with it. So that was part of my capstone project. If you read Emma and then you read James, sparks will go off. Two of the themes are the value of charity, true charity, and the taming of the tongue, using it to bless and not curse. So the book opens with this line that Emma Woodhouse was rich, smart, and handsome. And then you go, well, was she also spoiled? Because, rich, smart, and handsome. Nothing had ever stood in her way of anything. And so she has this kind of inflated view of herself. She does works of charity like a member of the gentry class would. She visits the sick, she visits the poor, but she also trash talks people who irritate her, including an older unmarried lady who used to be the vicar's daughter and is poor now, and an orphan who is her own age, who she's kind of jealous of her, but she trash talks her all the time. She has to learn true charity in the book. And she also needs to learn to use her tongue to bless and not to curse. So at one point, towards the end of the book, there's a picnic at a place called Box Hill, and everyone goes on the picnic, and Emma is just full of herself. She's flirting with this character, Frank Churchill, who he's not a roue, but he is vain and not trustworthy, but she has an opportunity to mock poor Miss Bates, and she takes it, and she just delivers a one-liner that cuts Miss Bates to the quick. And so her friend, Mr. Knightley, confronts her. And I think of this scripture, faithful are the wounds of a friend. So this is a little longer quote, but please bear with me. Emma, I must once more speak to you as I have been used to do, a privilege rather endured than allowed perhaps, but I still must use it. I cannot see you acting wrong without a remonstrance. How could you be so unfeeling to Miss Bates? How could you be so insolent in your wit to a woman of her character, age, and situation? Emma, I had not thought it possible. She is poor. She has sunk from the comforts she was born to, and if she lives to old age, must probably sink more. Her situation should secure your compassion. It was badly done indeed. You, whom she had known from an infant, from whom she had seen grow up from a period when her notice was an honor, to have you now in thoughtless spirits and the pride of the moment laugh at her, humble her, and before her niece too, and before others, many of whom, certainly some, would be entirely guided by your treatment of her. This is not pleasant to you, Emma, and it is very far from pleasant to me. But I will tell you truths while I can, satisfied with proving myself your friend by very faithful counsel, and trusting that you will sometime or another do me greater justice than you can do now. So here's the man versus herself plot. Man versus herself. Woman versus herself plot. Emma here now sees her faults and her sins and must overcome them. And so, as in most of these books, humility is the path to a happy marriage. And Mr. Knightley, as I said, wins the contest of all the women I've ever asked this question to, who is the most noble of Jane Austen's heroes. A lot of people do say Darcy, and Darcy has wonderful characteristics, but he's not Mr. Knightley. Okay. I will leave you with scripture. We'll leave Emma with this scripture. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. To me, this is what Emma is all about. Lastly, we have Persuasion. It was published posthumously. It was her last book, and we can just see the tone is a little more serious. The main character is older and sad. Like I said before, the subject matter is the Navy, the baronetcy, and the Napoleonic Wars are in the background. And I'm sure that she spoke with her brothers, Frank and Charles, to get that kind of atmosphere going. But it takes place in England. The novel is peppered with religious terms and themes: providence, penance, transgression, blessing, and charity. And 2 characters have transgressed. Well, before the novel opens, 7 or 8 years before, Anne was persuaded to reject an offer of marriage from a poor sailor because he was not in the gentry class and he had no money and no prospects for money. And even though she loved him, she was talked out of that marriage, and she has repented of it ever since. Her family is known for its pride. All throughout the book, you'll hear the term the Elliot pride, and that's what she has. That's what she had, but she really works it out. I've looked at this when I was studying in graduate school as the fictional illustration of parts of the book of Colossians. And do you have that quote? Okay. And I'm quoting from King James because King James is what she was reading, so maybe a little old-fashioned sounding. That ye might walk worthy of the Lord unto all pleasing, being fruitful in every good work, and increasing in the knowledge of God, strengthened with all might, according to his glorious power, unto all patience and long-suffering with joyfulness, giving thanks unto the Father, which hath made us meet to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in light, who hath delivered us from the power of darkness and hath translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son, in whom we have redemption through his blood. Anne is long-suffering. Have any of you seen the movie that has Kieran Hines in it as Colonel Wentworth? No? That poor actress. Her father hates her sister hates her other sister just uses her to complain to and whine to. She is always being asked to do things, and she does it without complaining, but she totally feels sorry for her. So she is long-suffering, she is patient, and she has totally repented of her Elliot pride. Another passage that I wanted to look at, and this one may be a little longer, is Colossians 3:13 through 14. Put on, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, compassion, which I changed it from the King James because the King James said bowels of mercy, and I didn't think that would bless anyone to hear. So, compassion, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering, forbearing one another and forgiving one another, if any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye. And above all these things, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. So Anne is the model of all these virtues. She shows compassion when her nephew Charles falls out of a tree and breaks his collarbone. She's charitable to her friend Mrs. Smith, who is a poor widow and also disabled. She shows kindness with acts to everyone when Louisa Musgrove falls off the cob She shows a lot of compassion for her and kindness. She treats her. Captain Bennick, who is also in that same kind of scene, she takes an interest in the poetry that he likes and gives him suggestions for poems that might not make him so gloomy. She has humility. She puts up with that father and sister who treat her like dirt. She plays piano when friends get together rather than dance, although she would love to be dancing, especially with Captain Wentworth. She is gentle. If you compare her with everybody else in the book, Anne is gentle and long-suffering. She has waited 8 years to see Captain Wentworth, and when he comes back, he flirts with other girls. He's kind of like punishing her for what she did to him before, but he comes to realize that she is the one. And, lots of things that I cut out because just things that people said to her in the book that are just horrible. But yeah, read it. And again, humility is the path to a happy marriage. So on to the prayers, and this will be very short, and we'll talk and I'm really beyond my time, and I apologize. Her prayers were influenced by the Anglicans' Book of Common Prayer. They reflect her devotion to God. They're full of the desire for personal improvement from faults and sins. They're full of charity towards one's fellow creatures. In it, she intercedes for the poor and the sick and shows concern for others. When she prays for the sick and afflicted, I like to think she's praying for her brother George. But she knew more people than that who were disabled. One of her best friends fell off a horse and died a week later. Like, it was horrible to be back then medically, I think. Her prayers reveal a compassionate person that valued charity. And I just had Drew, I didn't do this. You don't have a slide for it. Just a couple quick things. She prays, "Have mercy, O gracious Father, upon all that are now suffering from whatever the cause, that are in any circumstance of danger or distress." And I think about her naval brothers off at sea for years at a time, and they couldn't text. Give them patience under every affliction, strengthen, comfort, and relieve them. And then, for all whom we love and value, for every friend and connection, we equally pray, however divided and far asunder, we know that we are alike before thee and under thy eye. I love these prayers. So let's talk about the movies, shall we? I'm going to give you my favorites, and then we're going to have Q&A, and I'd love to hear what your favorites are. And you are certainly welcome to disagree with me, because we all have favorites for different reasons. Sense and Sensibility, I just think the Emma Thompson version is the definitive. You can clap, sure. I've watched some other versions, some BBC versions and stuff, but, and of course nothing's perfect, but I think the casting was amazing. The music is amazing. Anyway, they follow the book very closely. The only thing they left out that is so important is Willoughby actually comes back and unleashes his heart to Eleanor and shows how sorry he is for what he did, but, he's still married to the rich girl, and, I don't trust him. Pride and Prejudice, for me, it's the 1996 BBC with Jennifer Ely and Colin Firth. I just love the fact that it's 6 parts, so they didn't really cut things out. And again, the casting, Mrs. Bennet, just the whole casting is just unbelievable. Okay, now I'm gonna get everybody mad. Emma, I like the 2009 with Romola Garai. Again, it's a BBC, 3 or 4 part. It really is true to the book, and I love Romola. Oh, thank you, Sam. I know Drew likes the Gwyneth Paltrow, and that's a fun movie to watch. If you just want to watch a movie for fun, that's fine. And Jeremy Northam is the definitive, yeah, he is. He's the definitive Mr. Knightley. But they cut that movie up and pasted in. There's so many scenes that aren't in the novel, so I just can't give the Gwyneth Paltrow my kudos. Mansfield Park, okay, I don't like the quality of the movie because it was 1980, feels like 1883. 1983, but the actors were Sylvester Latouzel and Nicholas Farrell. It's a very true version of, I'll ask her later. Anyway, it's just that the quality of the film just looks grainy and old, even though 1983 wasn't that long ago. But anyway, Northanger Abbey. I like the 2007 with Felicity Jones and J.J. Field, but I don't feel like the definitive version of that novel has been done yet. So I'll just wait. Does anyone agree with me about that one? Yeah. If you've seen the one from a really long time ago with, Aaron, what's that actor? Peter Firth. Don't watch that movie. Anyway, Persuasion. This is the definitive for me. Amanda Root is the Anne Elliot, and Kieran Hines, who I don't always love, but he makes a good sea captain, and the movie's beautifully done, and that's all. So we can do Q&A, and we can start by saying, what are your favorites? And does anyone mind if I sit down? No. I don't want to scratch the floor, but here goes. Okay, Q&A. We can talk about movies. We can talk about anything. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I had a chance to look at Jane Austen, Smith, and that.
Oh, my.
And the thing that shocked me was one that, like you said, she never married. Like,
Yeah.
she wasn't the main person. But then she got so very little for her work. Like,
Yeah, no, she didn't. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Hal. Yeah, just she made the comment that Jane didn't get a lot of money for her books. Is that? Yeah, it is. That could be part of it. That could definitely be part of it. She did with one of her books she got an advance that she felt was respectable, but she never would have been able to support herself writing. So, yeah. Alas. Anyone else? I thought that Gunnar had a question, but I could be wrong.
I need a little more time to think.
Okay. Yeah, Jamie.
What period of her life was her marriage proposal accepted, rejected, whatever?
Yeah, so he asked, how old was she when she rejected Harris Bigwither? I love that name. I think she was about 21. I'm not sure. I can fact check that one. Anybody? Yeah, Jan.
so the movie Becoming Jane, how true is that?
Didn't see it because I'd read things about it that it really wasn't true. Okay, so she had fun, but I don't think she was as flirty as perhaps they made that out to be. I think Hollywood's fingerprint is on it. There was a man named Tom LaFoy that she was in love with at one point, and his mother separated them, sent him to Ireland, because although she was in the gentry class, she wasn't rich. She wasn't an heiress. So that part happened, but I haven't seen the movie. Oh, Drew's holding something up to me. Oh, I'm sorry. Jan asked, thanks. It would help if I could see. Jan asked, wait. Oh, the movie Becoming Jane, how true is that? I just didn't see it on purpose. Yeah, Sam?
What do you think is her finest artistic effort? 6 or 7 hours.
Okay, what was her finest artistic effort? I don't know if I can answer that question. So structure and character. And by the way, the reason that she is respected in academia, the reason that places like Hood College have courses in Austen, St. John's College in Annapolis has 2 required readings. One is Pride and Prejudice, one is Emma, is because of her influence in the development of the English novel, which was pretty actually new when she was doing it. If you look at Robinson Crusoe and others and her time period, it was a new genre. But I will get your question, Sam. I'm not just wasting time. And also, she's respected for the way she develops characters. They're not 2-dimensional. These are 3-dimensional characters who grow and change. So what is the most artistic, the finest?
You know, you talked to us about, you can talk in answering that question about how she began with Northanger Abbey and ended with Persuasion, which she begins really young.
Yeah.
I think that probably has some.
Yeah. Although, okay. Elise asked, just to answer Sam's question, how Northanger Abbey starts with kind of a silly young girl and Persuasion has the older, and the tone goes from witty and funny when you're laughing out loud reading it to Persuasion. So you can see a development, although I believe, and I hope I've never led you astray, that she wrote Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice first, but they had different titles, and she put them away for a while, and then, but anyway. But yeah, Northanger Abbey and early work. I might say either Sense and Sensibility or Persuasion. However, what book do I like to teach the best? I think Emma is the one I like to teach the best. I think that students just love it, and it's easy to see how Emma grows and changes. I love Mr. Knightley being the faithful friend that he is in his confrontation and how she responds. So yeah, I love them all. What can I say? Yes, Wendy.
Can you tell us more about her letters? To whom were they written, and
Okay.
how big is the collection? Is that something that's been published?
Okay, so she asked about her letters, and so this is the way I'll answer it. There was a wonderful BBC thing about Cassandra Austen this summer that some of you might have seen, and at the end, Cassandra burns Jane Austen's letters. Cassandra did burn some of her letters, but she couldn't have burned all of her letters because she wrote to her nieces and nephews, she wrote to her friends, so we have tons of them. Her nieces and nephews loved her and wanted her now I'm not thinking of a word again, legacy, thank you, to continue. So they published her letters, they wrote biographies about her. So we know tons of stuff about Jane. I've got 2 collections of her letters, and so yeah, I enjoyed reading them when I did. She was naughty sometimes too. You know, she was a godly woman, but she could definitely laugh at her neighbors and stuff. Yes.
Yeah, so you mentioned her relationship with Tom and how the family separated. Is there a parallel there with Jane Bennett? Does she see herself as Jane Bennett?
Oh, interesting. That could very well be. Yeah. Oh, repeat the question. Yeah. Is there a parallel between Jane Austen and Tom Lefroy and Jane Bennett being separated from Mr. Bingley at the beginning of the novel? Yeah, that could very well be. There's so many things from her life that you can see little snippets of, you know, like Frank Churchill and her brother Edward. both having been adopted by a different family. Anybody else? Yes.
Is there a character that like is clearly the most autobiographical character like, of yourself in any of her books?
I'm going to say no. I don't think so.
Heard it suggested once, Mansfield Park, like Fanny.
And you know what? So there was a movie version of Mansfield Park where they have Fanny up in the attic writing. She doesn't do that in the book. And plus Fanny is like, this is what C.S. Lewis called her, a boring prig. Right? So although C.S. Lewis loved Jane Austen's novels, but he didn't like Fanny. I don't think Fanny would be the one at all because Jane was so much fun. She was like the life of every party, and she just loved to laugh. And that's not Fanny. That's not Fanny in the attic. Anybody want to like claim one of these movies that I didn't claim? I won't defend myself or shame you, I promise.
You were really entirely agreeing, like I was wanting to clap.
Aw, thanks. Carla? What, do you know what year that was? Okay. Was it like a BBC? Okay. Yeah, I might not have seen it. I mean, yeah. I don't claim that I've seen them all, but that. So what do you love about that one? Okay, yeah. It doesn't seem like a Hollywood movie. Yeah. Oh, I'd like to check that out. Yeah. One cool thing about the one with Emma Thompson is that she wrote the screenplay for it, so that's kind of cool. I mean, she went to Cambridge and she's a smart lady. Yes, Jamie? Yeah, he asked where the portraits of her came from. One of them, that one right there in the middle, is Cassandra drew that. Her sister. Anybody else? You know we have, oh yeah, okay, good, I see. Yes, in the back. I'm sorry. Oh, that's a great question. I will look into that. I don't think I know the answer to that question. Oh, I'm sorry. What was the question? Which of the novels was Jane Austen's favorite? Does anybody know the answer to that? Aaron?
I know there's a quote of her saying, I believe that Lizzie Bennett is like the most delightful person to appear on a page or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she did say that Lizzie Bennett was the most delightful creature ever to appear on the page of a novel. I think she was going for every novelist, not just her novels. So yeah, that's good. She must have liked her. And there, I saw one other hand. Oh yeah, Paula. I have no idea. I think that she wanted to protect her privacy in some way. Don't we wish we could have those back? Sam?
The Puritans often burned their prayer journals and letters to protect both the innocent and the guilty.
Okay. Did everybody hear that? The Puritans burned their prayer journals to protect the innocent and the guilty. Oh, Ava.
So how many letters are there in all that we have of her?
Well, what we have is back there. I didn't count them, I'm sorry. But they're back there and you can borrow them. Okay. Anybody else? You know what? A lot of my friends brought wonderful cookies tonight, and we have some water back there. If you guys want to hang around, I'll be here for a while. If you need to go, go ahead. And thank you so much for coming. Bless you. I just thought of something. Oh, Drew, I just thought of something, and that is I would like to end formally the way Mr. Darcy ended his letter and say, God bless you.